Bayern Munich and Robert Lewandowski, as you just saw, were too much for Union Berlin, of course, in the 2-0 win. You just have a feeling that it will always going to be that way. As you can see, I had a dog in the fight. Been almost 40 years since I made my senior club debut against this wonderful club in this wonderful stadium away as a youngster, 16, 17-year-old at the time. So ever since then, I kept an eye on Union Berlin, even when they were in the lower divisions. Some games like these you don't forget, of course, and that's not a hipster pick on my part. I was very happy when they finally arrived in the Bundesliga, and I'm hopeful that they will stay in the Bundesliga as well. This wasn't the game that they needed to win. This Berlin derby coming up on the 22nd. That's next week, by the way, away to Hertha, who had a big result in the restart of the Bundesliga, beating Hoffenheim 3-0 away. But we'll get to that as well. Here, as I've mentioned, it was just too much class from Bayern Munich, even though the second goal from Benjamin Pavard came very, very late. Close decision on a penalty. I'll trust that VAR with all their lines got it right. I didn't see it anyway. It seemed to me like that should have been a goal already. And as we said, Robert Lewandowski, tremendous once again. Yes, it's a penalty. Aside from that, he didn't do too much, but he does what he does best, and putting Bayern Munich ahead from the spot as he does almost automatically. Just an incredible goal machine he is, isn't he? That's a 40th goal in all competitions, so that's 5 seasons on the trot with 40 plus goals. It's incredible. That's why you paid the money. Clearly the best number 9, maybe the traditional number 9, because I know people go crazy, and I can understand that, because I hate the comparisons because there are different number 9s these days, and there's so much else that's asked from strikers. But one thing that you always ask is consistency in scoring, and that's what Lewandowski does better than anyone out there at the moment. Yesterday we talked about Erling Haaland, and he is going to be the next one, I suppose, by the looks of it. Very, very similar in some ways to Lewandowski. Has the look of the traditional powerful striker. He's got more speed, I suppose, but he's going to give him a run for his money, I suppose, in the next season or two, because I still think Lewandowski's going to play for a long, long time. The way he takes care of himself. So for Bayern Munich, it wasn't sensational. It wasn't special. It didn't need to be. This is a rhythm team that, as we know, like their possession. We always knew that Union are going to sit back, and yet they were able to get through them as well. And at the beginning, of course, I've talked about too much Bayern and Robert Lewandowski, simply because, again, 40th goal in all competitions. He scored the first one, which likely was always going to be the winning goal, but the Canadian international, Alphonso Davies, just tremendous. Best player on the pitch for me. No questions about that. Again, you can see how he's growing in confidence, how he already feels himself as part of that starting 11. He's fully taken advantage of the trust he's gotten, and he's earned it, by the way. Where I think he picks himself in the starting 11 at the moment. I thought he was very good, showed his pace, but it's so easy to, I was watching Twitter as the game was going on, and yeah, it's easy to see how fast he is, and his recoveries, and just gliding through the air without an effort. But it wasn't that necessarily that impressed me about Alphonso Davies. It was his decision making and the end product, because I've seen him in Major League Soccer here, and even in the Bundesliga in the early matches, where of course he'd use the pace to get to the byline or even beat the last defender, and kind of just put it out there without even thinking, hoping, you put in front of goal and you hope that somebody latches onto it and puts it away. Nothing wrong with that, but very often maybe he did that without that last look, maybe just bringing his head up a little bit to see if maybe you pick somebody out with a pass. And I think we saw it today, and we've seen it in previous games, that he's doing that. His decision making is much, much better. I think he knows how to pause just a little bit, just a little pause to see if he can maybe take it himself, or maybe see if somebody's opening up. and maybe he can just put it on the platter for players. So I think it's important to talk about him because to me he was the most dangerous and the best player for Bayern Munich. Again, for Bayern, they get their advantage. They look, in my opinion, well on their way for another Bundesliga title. Of course, Mönchengladbach has won the game. Leipzig lost points, which I think is important because I still thought that Leipzig had the best squad to maybe that and Borussia Dortmund, of course, right? To compete against them. Dortmund were impressive. We still need to see Leverkusen, who's playing tomorrow, which is Monday, away to relegation threatened Werder Bremen. Overall, I think it's been a great opening weekend or restart of the Bundesliga, if you will. And Bundesliga here certainly taken a risk for the rest of football here. 50-50 as we know it, but so far so good. We'll have to wait and see what happens with the players during the week once they get retested again. It wasn't an easy decision. I think Bundesliga has been criticized in many quarters, but they did take the risk for all the other football nations, the big nations, I suppose, to see, or maybe even different sports, not just in football, to see how to progressively come back to normalcy in some way and come back to sports. So I think that's important, and we'll judge that in weeks to come, of course, when it comes to Bundesliga. But the risk they've taken was incredibly hard. Easy to criticize, but I think you got to give them some credit for that. So anyway, we still have one more game to go. As we mentioned, on Monday, Werder Bremen against Bayer Leverkusen. So that should be pretty good as well. Until then, so long.